Good evening. We are now meeting with Sergio Gomez, and Sergio is in Chicago and is, for lack of a better term, a jack of all trades, and does a lot of different kinds of things in the art world. Let's go back to the beginning, Sergio. There you are unmuted. Where were you born?
Well, hello everybody. First, good to be with you all today.
Thank you.
I was born in Mexico. I was born in a city called Puebla. It's about 2 hours from Mexico City. When my parents moved to Mexico City, I was probably like 3 years old. So I pretty much grew up in Mexico City until I was 16 when we came to the Chicagoland area. Prior to that, in Mexico, I can say that I started art when I was small, when I was a kid, doing art just as a pastime. Something that my parents always did is they always provided me with paper and supplies. So, and that was before the cell phones and all these devices that kids have today. So my parents, to keep me busy, they would only give me paper and pencil, especially when we were in church and things of that nature. So, I say that I started as an artist in church because that's how they kept me quiet, and kind of entertained. So I would do these little cartoons and stories that they would collect and keep. So at an early age, I kind of understood that what I was doing meant something for somebody else. For my relatives were things that they kept. And some of them, they still have the little things I did when I was a child. But when I came to Chicago, I was 16 years old. I did not speak any English, just the very basics. And I had to start school immediately, so I went to high school. As I began high school and not really understanding the culture, the language, I was really lost. But there was one thing that just kept me going, which was I signed up for an art class. There was an art club. And so I joined the art club and the yearbook club. And even though I had a really hard time communicating with my words, the other kids kind of find out that I knew how to draw. So they would ask me to draw things for the yearbook or for the posters and that kind of thing. So it was through that experience that I was kind of beginning to develop some sort of a connection with the art and where I could communicate myself with other people. But by the time I finished high school, I really did not know much about how to sign up for college, what to do. So I didn't even know. Up to that point, I had never met an artist that actually made a living making art. I just had never been in contact with one. But my high school teacher said, well, why don't you consider, you like art, why don't you just go to a community college, find out what you like to do, and just kind of see if you like it, just take art. And so he actually went to the point to tell me, sign up for classes and tell me register, me fill out the paperwork. There were still many things that I could not understand with my lack of understanding on the language. So I signed up for community college, and I just loved it. I just took all the classes they had to offer. So I finished that, and it was the same thing. That's where I first began to get acquainted with some of the artists in Chicago who were part of the Latino community, such as Alejandro Romero, Cortez, and others who were influential already in the community. And for the first time, I saw a living artist making art and making a living out of it, which for me was a huge eye opener. When my parents asked me, what are you gonna do? And I said, well, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna make art. What are you gonna do with that? I would say, I don't know, because I don't know anybody who makes it, right? But it was through that experience of slowly learning and seeing what artists were doing at the time that really opened my eyes. So after I finished community college, went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I was there for a while. I met some great professors who I connected with really good. But again, I had no financial support, and my parents could not afford my tuition by no means. So I transferred to a university that's south of Chicago, Governor State University. What I found, it was a small program. The professors were really caring, and so I pursued an art career. Early on in my education, I learned about the importance of submitting my work to exhibitions, and I would just go online or I would always look at the board at the university and see what was being posted, called for artists, and I would submit to a lot of stuff. Since I was in college and early on, I got admitted in many exhibitions, which started to get my work out there, and seen, and sometimes through one exhibition opened a door for another one. More people started to see my work. And so that helped me a lot. That helped me a lot. That even while I was still young and doing my bachelor's, I was exhibiting and call for artists that would just come up that I thought would fit to my work. Some of them I got in, some of them I did not get in. But I just kept trying. I thought that was important. After that, finished Governor State. I really love technology. It's kind of, for me, go hand in hand. I'm a painter. I do painting, drawing, but I love technology. I always love it. So as I took painting and drawing, I always took design courses too, because I love the Mac and I love Photoshop and I love Illustrator. I just love to work with technology. And once I finished my MA, I started working as a graphic designer. And I put my art career in terms of making, painting work and the really work that I was interested, off for probably a year or so, where I was making work in my garage, but it wasn't the work that I was happy with. It wasn't work that I wanted to show. It wasn't work that I was proud of making. But I just kept making it because I thought that was important. And some of the artists that I had known by then, they just kept telling me, you just have to keep making art. Even if you're having a hard time, even if it's not working, you just gotta keep doing it. So I just kept making it in my garage, and not showing it too much. Or sometimes I would paint something and then just cover it up the next month, and my wife would come in the garage and say, "Why, what have you done? You just erased what you just did the last 2 months." But it was part of my process of understanding what I wanted to do. So I work as a graphic designer, and I decided it was time to do something else and go back. I wanted to get my MFA. And so I went and enrolled at Northern University. So I was commuting because I had to work. I had a family, we had a baby. I could not afford to just leave it all and go full swing into my MFA. So I was working full time as a graphic designer in Indiana, and I would go like really early, skip lunch, eat my lunch or my dinner on the way to the university 3 times a week to Northern, which was about 2-hour drive each way. And I did that for 3 years to really pursue what I really wanted, which was the MFA. Why I did it is a twofold answer. Is I wanted to do the MFA because I believe if I wanted to ever teach, I needed an MFA. Also, because I had children, I wanted to get to the end of my degree as an example to my children of that I could do it as an immigrant who came to the United States and I started from zero where nobody knew me, nobody knew who I was. I wasn't a disadvantage, but if I was able to do it, they could do it if they put their mind to it. So that kind of led to, as I was at Governor State, at Northern Illinois doing the MFA program, met really good professors, really good friends and artists who, we just kept working hard, and continue exhibiting, continue showing our work. And as we finished the program, we asked ourselves, so what are we going to do now? And one of the things we did, there were 4 of us who really wanted to put together sort of a exhibit area, kind of small gallery space where we could show our own work, and also a space where we could do our own work. So kind of a studio, a showing space. And it was then where I found the Zhou brothers, 2 Chinese artists living in Chicago, who had purchased this gigantic space, 80,000 square feet of space, 5 stories high, 4 stories high, sorry, and a lower level, warehouse style. It used to be a Spiegel warehouse here in Chicago, South Side, and back then it was completely empty. There was only 1 person who had just moved in, so we went to see it because we were looking for space to work and to open up. And the first day we went, we met the Zhou brothers. They invited us in. They showed us the space. They gave us their idea for what they wanted to do, and we just believed it. We said, this sounds pretty cool. We were just out of college. We wanted to do something significant. So we moved in, and that's when we formed what was called back then 33 Collective Gallery, which was more of a co-op thing. Just friends, buddies who just got together and started, just inviting our own friends that we met in college to do their shows and things. And something that I found along the way that I didn't know is that I started to really had a love for administrative work within the gallery setting. I never thought of myself working at a gallery. I never had an ambition to work at a gallery, but it just I grew into it. I found that I love connecting with artists. I love the administrative part of it, organizing the exhibitions, the press releases, advocating for the arts, and just getting to know other artists as well. So that collective that began with just 4 people started to grow. And what happened is that I found myself really leading the gallery, and the friends who I started with, they had not a whole lot of interest in the administrative part of the gallery. So we talked and said, well, maybe you don't have to feel like you have to be doing something if you're not interested in gallery work. So we closed the co-op, and then I reopened it just simultaneously under my own name, 33 Contemporary Gallery, but now as a business of my own, and started running it as a gallery business rather than as a co-op. And so through that and working with the art center, I began to get more involved with the exhibitions, not only in my gallery space, but then an opportunity came up to move in as a curator of the Zhou B Art Center, which really gave me an open field and an open playground where my gallery space, 33 Contemporary Gallery, is only 800 square feet. The Zhou B Art Center has 2 galleries, one at 10,000 square feet and the other one at 15,000 square feet. So simultaneously, every month, I was learning to work in my mind, small scale, intimate space, gigantic, large scale, really space-wise. I learned to manage space quickly and understand space and how work will work in large scale versus small scale, which for me, I find it, I think it's a privilege that I have that accessibility of working with that. And the Zhou brothers gave me a really big support and an open hand to put together my own projects and put together my own curatorial ideas. This year we will be celebrating our 10th year since we opened, and it's been a ride. Eventually, I started teaching 5 years ago. I went into teaching as well. because I love it. I find it invigorating as a person, and I think it's something that I love to do as well. As far as the gallery, just recently, we've always been interested, my wife and I, in social causes, and we just opened another business that has a social end that's called 3C Wear, and what we do is we team with artists. They design t-shirts for us, and then what we do is with the sales of the t-shirts, we give school supplies to underprivileged kids in South Chicago, Chicagoland area, suburbs, and also Northwest Indiana. And that's kind of the newest things that we've been working with as well. And one of the things that always bothered me when I was kind of finishing my education was this idea of what is a full-time artist. I don't know how many of the listeners today here, or the participants, I should say, do other things like teaching or curating or gallery work or something else. And I always was intrigued with this idea of what really is a full-time artist. I started to find this idea that a full-time artist is one who's always in the studio. And I said, why? I mean, art is not something that you go and check in at 8 and you leave at 5. That's not how art functions, at least not in my experience. Art happens when it needs to happen, whatever time may be. If art needs to happen, it will happen. And this idea of the full-time, if you are teaching, therefore you're not a full-time artist, or if you are doing this, you're not a full-time artist. I don't believe that. I completely disregard that notion. I think it could work. It's not as important as what goes in the studio, but what goes out of the studio. In the time that I put in my studio, besides my teaching and my curatorial and my gallery work and my entrepreneurship and all the other things that I do, the social things that I do, I produce work, I exhibit. The goals that I put for myself as an artist, I'm meeting those goals. I continue to work, I continue to exhibit. This year I have exhibitions lined up already. I always wanted to do a museum show. Last year I did a museum show at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago. I did a museum show in Turin in Italy, and wanted to participate in art fair. We did that last year. And so to me, this idea that a full-time artist is one who's always in the studio, to me, at least in my own experience, it doesn't make sense. Because what I always wanted to do is do a career in art in which Sergio, who is the artist, is the same who is the designer, who is the professor, who is the curator. This idea of, I change hats, to me, it's an old idea. That's the idea that every time you put a hat, you are somebody else. You have a different identity. You have a different role. So I'm the teacher, now I'm, the curator, and etc. To me, that doesn't make sense either. And I wanted to be the same person who's speaking here to you right now, the same guy with the same ideas, the same who I am, the same guy that goes in the studio, the same guy that talks to the artist, the same guy that does the lectures, the same guy that meets with future curatorial projects, and that has worked for me. The way I see all these roles, I've learned over the years. There's one thing that always surprises me, and that I'm really active in social media. I'm fellow of technology. I'm very active in social media. I found that it's a great way for me to keep track of artists, to meet new artists. Sometimes as I'm working on different curatorial projects, I meet artists from all over the world that I find the work that maybe I'll be working on an idea for a curatorial project, either for my gallery or the art center or somewhere else that I may be working with, and allows me to to interact with people via social media. And people ask me all the time, how do you do all these things? How do you sleep? But for me, I do sleep. I try to sleep 7 hours a day at least. But for me, it has always been this idea we all have the same number of hours, and it's just how we manage them. Each one of us is different, and there's nothing really glorious about doing a lot of things. I think everyone should do what you can manage and what you can really work with. Just because one person does more in terms of more roles doesn't mean that everybody should do it. If we are all different, we are all work different. Just as I think as you talk in your webinars, Paul, you talk about you set up your own success is defined by your own sets. You define your own goals and your own successes, and you work towards those. And that's how it has worked for me. I see each of these things that I do as parallels. And I draw kind of like this, I draw them sometimes on paper. This parallel lines that the gallery is one line, my curatorial work is another line, my studio practice is another line. As an educator, as a family person, and as long as those lines keep running in the same direction, I believe I am able to do all these things effectively. If one of these lines crosses the path of another, that's where I have a problem, and this is something I need to fix. It is something I need to keep track of. But I found that, through the way I work, it seems to make sense for me, this idea of lines, and that way I can always see. One thing I learned early on is I don't feel guilty if I don't have a certain number of hours in the studio. Sometimes I meet artists, as we work together, that if you are teaching, if you take a teaching position, then you start to feel guilty because you don't have time to be in the studio, and guilt sets in, and you always feel guilty because you don't have the time to do what you really wanted to do. But at the end of the day, it's a choice. That's a choice that we made to teach or to do this or that. And as such as a choice, we need to be able to manage it. So for me, I left guilt behind long ago. So these are the choice. Every time I wake up in the morning, I have a set of things I need to do on each of these different parallel lines, and I can keep track. If I need to, because I may have a show coming up, and I need to work on my studio practice, what other line can I leave behind a little bit so I can catch up and I can continue growing and working all these parallel lines simultaneously. So, it seems that for me it's a way of working in an organized manner that has left guilt behind.
I think this is all thoroughly amazing. I hear totally what you're saying, and the facility with which you can do all these different things simultaneously. I'm wondering initially about, I just heard you say that you wake up in the morning and you say, I need to spend this much time on A, this much time on B, this much time on C. So let's say A, you've decided we need to spend 2 hours on A. Let's say that's in the studio. So you go to the studio, but you're having a really hot moment. And so, but the 2 hours are up. Do you say, oh, I need to leave the studio now? Or do you say, hell with B, I'm sticking to A? How do you make these choices?
And yeah, that's a good question, because as I work on all these things, I have made my life structured in a way that it works for me. So in the morning I go teach. Not every day, but most of the days when I have to go teach. Then on my way to the gallery is where I go to teach. So when I teach and I'm done with teaching in the morning, then I can go directly to the gallery, which is on the way. And as when I get to the gallery, it's only a 20-minute drive from where I teach, and where I teach is only about another 20-minute drive from where I live. My gallery and my studio are in the same building. When I go and work in my studio, I go directly to my studio, and so that nobody sees me. If they see me, then they'll be knocking on my door. And that's my studio time. I try to do my studio time in the last of the days I decide to do studio work, because especially what you just said, it's easier for me to just stay later and have less sleep. I have to call you and say, Paul, I cannot come to the webinar because I have to paint.
Yeah, that's right. Damn it. One of the things that I think you are incredibly good at is looking. I think I'm perpetually impressed with the quality of the thematic exhibits that you create. And you come up with more themes and more ideas for exhibits and put in more worthy artists that most people aren't quite aware of. How are you seeing so damn much, and how are you keeping it all organized?
Well, part of it has to do, the organization part, I'll answer that first, is the technology. There are so many resources today that allow us to keep our information organized.
Yeah, but do you look up, will you go online and look up something that says Chicago artists working with natural materials? And what are you going to come up with? You get a picture of a squirrel.
I know, that's right. No, I use an app in my phone that synchronizes with my iPad and my laptop and everywhere. That's called Evernote.
Right.
And maybe some of you have heard of it. Evernote, you can create projects. So let's suppose and I put in the gallery and at the art center, I work a year in advance. So that I have time to think about the artist and to think about who I'm inviting, and so I have time to process all the information. I don't like to turn a show, with 2 months preparation. To me, I need time, and so I give myself 6 months to a year to start looking at different artists and ideas. And so when I get an idea, I just write it down in Evernote, and if it flies, then I start finding artists. For example, when I did Chicago's 12, which was a big show that took a lot of attention here in Chicago, and then the city of Chicago invited me to bring that show to the Garfield Park Conservatory, which is the largest conservatory in the United States. That show, that idea turned just one Saturday morning. I woke up and I told my wife, wouldn't it be great if we do an exhibition like Chicago's 12, kind of like, and I woke up with this in mind that, the movie Ocean's 11, and in the poster of Ocean's 11, you have the 11 characters, just the silhouette walking towards the viewer. So I said, wouldn't it be great if we find 12 Chicago artists? That was 2012, the year of renewable energy or something like that. If I can find 12 artists living in Chicago right now who have this as their heart, everybody has done a piece or two or something related maybe to something environmentally. But if we find 12 artists who are really excited about the environment, this is something that they care about, this is something that they work with on a daily basis, and we can bring them together, kind of like Ocean's 11, the Chicago's 12, and even the poster that I created, had that kind of feel of I photographed all the artists walking barefooted towards me, and because I worked with digital imaging, then I was able to then create their silhouettes and really customize it. And I like to think, when I think of a show, I like to think of the whole thing, not just the theme, but also the marketing, how sticky is the title for someone. There are some great show titles, but next month nobody will remember because they're so complex or so long. They might sound really nice in a resume, but other than that, I like to create shows that ordinary people, when they hear it, they could remember, like they could resonate to something that they might have familiarity with. And that's how a lot of ideas sometimes just show up out of something I see, something that just I imagine, or I don't know. I mean, it just kind of comes around, and a lot of ideas come also from other artists, who send proposals, and we find the proposal to be viable and be interesting, and then we start working with them and the artists, and then the whole theme and what comes out from a team effort.
Are you a not-for-profit or a for-profit gallery?
No, I am a for-profit.
Are you trying to sell stuff?
We like profit. Absolutely.
Are you representing artists?
Yes, we represent artists. 30 Contemporary Gallery represents artists in a way that it makes sense to us and to me as an artist. When I structure the gallery, I structure in a way that, thinking of me as an artist, what would I want from a gallery besides sales? Yeah, we all want to sell, but what else? What are the other things that to me are important as an artist? And so the artists that I work with, I try not. I mean, my focus is not only in the sales, but try to work with the idea of giving artists opportunities to do other things, to expand their careers. So, for example, something that I really enjoy doing, really like to do, is network with other galleries or museums or organizations internationally, and just exchange ideas, exchange artists. Last year we did an exhibition in Mexico, kind of a reciprocal exhibition. We sent work to Mexico, and the government paid for the whole exhibition. So all the artists that we had, we come up with a team. We sent the exhibition there. We hosted the exhibition of the Mexican artists here in Chicago. We did an exhibition at the Regional Museum of Natural Science in Turin, Italy. So I went and I took a big exhibition from Chicago artists that I work with. We did an exhibition of paperworks in Vienna with another gallery there that we did an exchange. And I really enjoy doing those things because I think it's not all about sales. It's not all about the sales are really important, but I think growing an artist and to a point of maturity and getting their work exposed beyond what I can do in Chicago, I think for me it's really important, and I take that really seriously.
Do you see yourself more? I know the answer, but do you see yourself more as a curator or as an artist?
Well, I think the artist is the curator and the gallerist and the educator.
I knew you were going to say that. Interesting. But for me, I see you most as a curator.
Okay.
Because that's where I see the most words.
Mm-hmm.
I get I see more about things that you are curating than I see things about your own personal exhibitions.
Yeah, and it has to do with exposure. The things that you are exposed to and what
Sure.
I'm doing are quite visible to you, and so that's a normal assessment.
How many shows have you curated? How many shows do you curate a year?
I don't count them, because if I count them, then you start to compare and say, oh, this year I didn't do as much as last year, or vice versa. It's not about the numbers, but in terms of for the last 10 years, we've been doing a show a month at the gallery. So that would be what, 100 and something.
A few.
A few. And then for the Art Center, which I've been curating for the last 4 or 5 years, we've also been doing a show a year. A show a month. However, not every show is I'm curating it. Sometimes there are proposals, artists in a proposal. The show is already pretty much conceptualized, and all we do is to facilitate the exhibition. Otherwise, I could not do a show. 2 shows every month completely from scratch.
Are you teaching at one institution?
Yeah, I teach at college, South Suburban College, College South of Chicago.
you could be teaching, you know, knowing you could be teaching at 3 different places. Do you ever feel like the amount of curating and exhibitions you do gets in the way of your art career, or do you feel like it's always serving your art career?
I believe it does both. I mean, like I said, I try not to feel guilty for not doing this or that, because it's a matter of love, I think, and I love with passion both things. I define passion by that which you do and time goes by and you don't notice. And when I'm doing what I do either in my studio and my wife has to call me, when are you coming home? Or if I'm working at the gallery, curating or hanging a show, working with artists, and my wife has to call me, when are you coming home? I love both. You know, there's a love in which keep me going and not feeling guilty about one or the other. Now, of course, any activity that you do demands energy from you, right?
Wait, say that again. Demands what?
Energy.
Right.
Energy. You know, and the body needs energy. So I try to take care of my body. I try to eat healthy and you know, keep my energy that will sustain me throughout the day to do the things I want to do. But I recognize that eventually, you know, as I'm getting older, I don't have the same energy I had when I was 30. Now I'm 42. So I'm already looking at the future and saying, okay, what things do I need to start slowing down now, so that my studio practice does not get hurt because I'm doing too much shows. So this year already I'm cutting down on some of the shows I'm curating, and now I'm bringing in guest curators too to our institution, and providing the space, providing logistics, but then they're doing, you know, some of that.
Good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you have to not, if you just live by the day, before I know it, I'm gonna burn out my craft, and I want to you know, be able to do what I love with passion effectively. And if I cannot do it effectively, then I shouldn't do it.
Why don't we open this up for questions? If you guys have some questions, I would please raise your hand, and I will call on you. I don't see any hands raised at the moment. Sergio, how many artists does your gallery represent?
Give and take, right now we have 28, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they all Chicago artists?
The majority, but we have an artist from Italy, we have an artist from China, we have an artist from Germany, one from LA, and one from Miami.
How do you find these artists that are not from your own hometown? How do they find you?
Most of the artists that I work with is artists that I have built a relationship through. Most of them have come through the various curatorial projects. Sometimes, if I'm interested in an artist, I invite them for a show that I might be curating at some point. I never invite an artist from Carson to be part of the gallery or to represent. To me, the character of the artist is as important as the work they make. You know, can we work together? Can we relate to each other? Can we build trust? And the only way to do it is by working in projects, you know, curatorial projects where I invite them in. And that's when you see, you know, who is responsible. You know, if you have a show and the work doesn't come, or the quality might look great on the screen, but once you get it, the quality might not be there. And so, you know, that raises red flags. You know, do I really want to work with this artist? Well, I've been asking for that information for the last 5 days and nothing comes in. You know, I think I find those things very important, especially when I'm very precise in my schedule and I need things on to be able to do what I want to do and promote the exhibition and the materials and so forth. So it always comes through that first experience, and relationships just built, even with people who are artists who are not from Chicago, and I'm always open to keep working with artists in that way.
Pasha, you have a question or comment? Please go ahead.
Yes, I had a question. Hi, Sergio. You've mentioned that you use social media a lot and you rely on it. I wanted to ask you to get into more detail about that and make a suggestion for people who want to start in the social media, where to start besides Facebook. which I'm sure most people are using.
Yeah, so, hi, how are you?
Hi.
Social media, yeah, it's one of those things. And I have a blog that I run, and I do interviews with artists. And I always, my favorite questions to ask artists is, do you find social media to be an asset or a distraction for your art career? And everybody answers it differently. But I find it a very interesting question because everybody has a different opinion on that. And for me, if social media is a distraction for your art production, then don't do it. You know, then why would you need another distraction? However, if you can use social media in a way that brings an asset to what you do, then I think it's a good thing. The way I use social media is for promotional ideas, for finding artists, for my various curatorial projects, for sometimes just testing ideas out. And I love to see artists in their studios. And I find social media is when an artist working in their studio, sometimes they put pictures of what they're working on or when a new work just came out. I just find that fascinating. I find it so fascinating that I just open up, because I don't have anything to do. I just open up another website that's called artistintheirstudios.com. And every day I post a video or information about artists in their studios. I think that's fascinating, sacred spaces of creativity. And so to answer specifically the question, social media to me works as long as I can manage it and it doesn't manage me. And I use it for promotional of the exhibitions, the projects that I do. I recommend artists using it, also for promotion of their own exhibitions, their own work, as long as again it doesn't interfere with other things that you might be doing. And there's so many platforms, Facebook, Twitter. Everybody has their favorites. There's applications like Hootsuite that you can manage multiple social media outlets out there. But I have connected a lot of that things to my blog. And blogs are great. And for artists who use blogs, they are wonderful, an asset for particularly search engines. Search engines love blogs. And when you do a blog, you get indexed in search engines, and you can make your blog to feed also all your social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and etc. So there are a lot of number of artists who are using blogs to keep track, to keep people informed on what they're doing, to keep their collectors informed on what they're doing. Not to give too much, but not to give too little, just to give enough of what they're working on. I think we live in a time where there's so much information coming everywhere, and Paul has seen a lot of my stuff I do on Facebook because I'm in it. I keep using it to promote the art, promote what I do, and promote the art. Personally, I also manage my social media, where my Facebook profile is for the arts, and the gallery has its own page. My artist studio practice, I have my own artist page. So in my own Sergio Gomez artist studio, I don't mix my personal pictures of my family or projects that I'm curating. That's a specific platform for my studio practice. So I show things that have to do with my studio practice. The other one is for for my gallery. The other one is just for the general publicity of exhibitions and to find new people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you too. Monica, go ahead.
Sergio, thank you for joining us this evening. I have a question about work-life balance. You've talked a lot about work-work balance, but you mentioned you have kids. You mentioned your wife calls you to say it's time to come home. How do you balance that aspect of your life and all the other stuff?
That's a good question, and part of it is at least in the family life, it's from an understanding. My wife is she's not an artist, she's a psychologist. She has a doctorate in psychology, and but from the beginning, since we got married, she understood that I'm an artist, and artists don't work an 8 to 5 job. You know, so there's already from the get-go an understanding of how we function, and that relieves us from a lot of stresses. You know, why you're not home at 5:30, you know, like everybody else. You know, why you don't watch the Olympics together, you know, and that kinds of thing. So I think balance comes at least for me in understanding over roles, responsibilities. Our children, I have a 12-year-old boy and a 8-year-old girl. It's a boy and a girl. Since they were little, they have been coming to our openings, to our gallery exhibitions. I mean, sometimes I meet artists who say, "Oh, you know, I cannot come to the openings anymore because I have a kid." You know, it's like, well, you know, my kid was 3 days old when he went to his first opening. Maybe that's extreme, but and it wasn't a good idea because everybody was looking at the baby rather than my work. But uh, it's that understanding of the role that we have in playing. What's at the end of the day, you make time for what you believe is important, and I think that's how I define it. If I believe what I'm doing is important, I have to make time for it, and manage it. You know, we all get the same amount of hours. It's just we all use it differently. And just because one person does more things than another doesn't mean that that person is more important. You know, I think everybody manages differently, and everybody can focus differently on certain things. And we just have to learn to know how much is too much, and and not live with. I think the worst thing we can happen is to live with guilt. See, I don't want to live with guilt to say, you know, I did all this, and oh man, I wish I could have spent more time in my studio. Because I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that big painting I always wanted to do. You know, if I want to do that big painting, I'll make time for it. I'll schedule. I'll do what it needs to be done, so I don't have that guilt later on. And I find that a life that has freedom, that has the ability to manage stress in a way that's healthy. And stress is good. The more things you do, it carries a lot of responsibilities and a lot of stress. But the stress, in a way, is good because it allows you to solve problems on the fly, on the go, which I find that helps me in the studio too, as I'm working all the time with problems and solving visual problems. So hopefully that answers somewhat the question.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you both. I think you have a pretty damn good attitude, Sergio. I think the attitude helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sherry, hold on. As soon as I find your name, go ahead.
Hi, Sergio.
Hi, Sarah.
I was interested in the T-shirt
Yeah.
thing.
Wait a minute. I hit the wrong button. Sergio, I muted you by mistake. So Sherry was asking about the T-shirts. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. What happens is because my wife worked as a school psychologist, and she knew how teachers in the schools don't, you know, always struggle, especially in lower income communities, to have supplies for children. We have kids, and we were always interested in doing something to help the community through our businesses, through the gallery, and through the things that we do. So that's when we started 3C Wear. And it's called 3cwear.com. It's an online store where people can buy a T-shirt that is a limited edition T-shirt that the artists, written by artists. They design it, and it's available only for 2 months. And after those 2 months, that's it. People cannot order that design anymore. So it makes it exclusive. It's great for the artists too. We promote the artists. We go to the artist home or studio. I'm sorry. We do a video promotional with them for them. And it's a win-win situation. We give to the kids. We do what we call inspire giving days where we actually go ourselves. We bring the school supplies. We give them to the kids in their hands. We don't believe in just dropping them off in somebody's office and then hoping that they will do it. We go and we meet each kid that gets a full bag of school supplies. And those are things that are important to do, I believe. Because one day I was, I mean, I grew up in not in a wealthy family by no means.
Right. I love printmaking, and so I think that's a great little venue for printmakers.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of our, I think we have 2 artists that have been printmakers that have a really wonderful design for it. You can check it out. You see where that's on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hey, Bob, did you have a question, Bob?
Sergio, I'm blown away by all the things you're doing. I think it's terrific. But one thing we haven't talked about here tonight is your art, which I'm also blown away by. I love it. But I'm a sculptor, and so I don't really know how you create that look that I find so intoxicating. And I wonder if you have just 2 minutes here at the end, if you can talk a little bit about your process, the complexity, the layers. Are you taking the paper and rolling it up and crinkling it? You have this vibrant green that comes through at the end. Is that sprayed on? I mean, can you just tell us how you get that amazing look?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be more than happy to talk about the work. I work in layers, as you said. I have a fascination for paper. Since I took a printmaking class, I love paper, fell in love with paper, and I've never left it. I'm faithful to paper, but I like to work big and large scale, and so as you know, paper is very rigid. It's not rigid enough for large scale. So over time, I work with working with different types of mediums to adhere the paper. Oh, there you go. You see some of it. To adhere the paper to the canvas, and so what I do, that's one of the smaller pieces, but I adhere the paper to the canvas using gel medium because it's flexible. And on all the larger pieces, I always leave a 2 or 3 inch white border around, which protects the image itself as well. All my pieces start with charcoal drawings. I love charcoal too, and in some of them you can still see the charcoal. So my normal process, I start with charcoal, and then I do layers of acrylic until, just keeps layering, and I love texture, and sometimes I wrinkle the paper before gluing it into the canvas. Sometimes I don't, sometimes it's nice and smooth. Kind of depends on what I'm looking for. But it's funny because in the studio, I love accidents, and I love to respond to them. While outside of the studio, I like the structure, I love the structure of things. But in life, but in my studio, I love the I should say the accidents that may happen without knowing, and then trying to respond to them in the moment. Most of the figures are my work is based on the human form. That one is a charcoal drawing that's life size. The figure in the middle is life size. It's one large work. And so yeah, I mean it's a lot of layers. I think that's what it's just layering over layering and adding and subtracting, and until I find the desired image.
Do you make art, Sergio, every week?
Excuse me?
You make art every week, at least?
Yeah. And something that and it's just because I have my studio next to the gallery, allows me sometimes to just step out and start some sketching or start developing things and ideas that's what I love charcoal too. It's so spontaneous, and I can just pull up a piece of charcoal, roll paper. I buy papers in rolls. So I always have paper available. My studio is always ready for me to just walk in and work, where I don't have to spend 3 hours on setup. And that just works for me.
Does anybody else have a question? I don't think I see any more questions. Bob, did you have another question, or are you good?
No, I'm going to learn. I have to unhand myself.
Good luck with that. Oh, you did it. All right. And, oh, Anissa has a question. Yes, Anissa, go ahead.
Did you say you leave a 2-inch white border around the edge of your work before you stick to the canvas?
Yeah, and the reason is practical as well as visual. So the work is large. I like that division between the work and the surface of the gallery space. I like my work to be a sort of a door or a window as well. So it acts as that frame of a door or a window. And also it protects the work from, I do a lot of, I ship my work a lot to shows outside of Chicago, and I can roll the work, and if it gets a little damage on the edges, I can always fix it. And when I sell work, I mount the work to a board, and I have that, those 2 inches of room to play with when it comes to framing for permanent display.
Cool. Thank you. Bert, you had your hand up, your hand's down. I'm going to assume you're taking. Bert, do you have a question? You're all right.
Wondering how he protects the charcoal, if he just uses fixative, and because he's saying that he's rolling the work and shipping it, it sounds like it's kind of fragile.
Yeah, I do fix it, and then I use acrylic gel medium to seal it. And usually my process starts with the charcoal drawing, the fixative, then the sealer of acrylic gel medium, and then I paint over it with acrylic. So the charcoal, the charcoal ends up being one of the previous layers. So by the time it's all finished, there's no smearing.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you too, Bert. We might be done. I'm looking for more hands. I see one, but I don't know if it's real or not. Oh, Marzina has a question. Go ahead, Marzina.
Hi, Sergio. You mentioned permanent display of your works. How do you do it? Do you use stretcher or different kind of framing?
Yeah, I don't use stretcher because it's already quite stiff because of the paper glue, and I use printmaker paper, so it's really thick. It's heavy. So what I do is I use a board. I have a guy who does all my framing. So we built a surface of wood, and then the canvas then is just stretched over the wood, and then just frame around that.
Thank you.
So it doesn't actually stretch on a hollow surface, but there's a wood surface behind.
Do you use any frames?
That I do frame. I like to keep it white with just wood strips of 2 inches white. But if the buyer wants to frame, then I have no opposition to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Sherry, do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay. All right, Sergio, I think you're off the hook. I think this has been really informative. I still haven't quite figured out how you do all these different things simultaneously. I get that you don't feel guilty, and I get that it's pretty organic. I'm impressed. And I think you're doing a lot of good things, and I appreciate your contribution, just to society and art in general, but I also appreciate you sharing your insights with the people in this group. Let me unmute everybody so we can all thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Sergio, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And all right, I will see